Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you as always for stopping by. Let me start with I participated in the East African Property Investment Summit, which is actually their fifth at the Radisson Blu. And I was speaking about the East African macro outlook. I spoke about Ramaphoria. I spoke about the Horn of Africa becoming a proxy theatre. Ethiopia touched on the linguistics. He's sending love to Eritrea. I said no Ethiopian has been sending love to the Eritreans for years, decades, and how it was a significant linguistic change. Talking about Kenya expecting a stronger rebound this year, reasons for optimism, and then some of the reasons to be a little bit concerned. But overall, I'm bullish. I think we've got these big macro trends, massive population surges, urbanization, which is going to continue to feed demand. I took this little bit of video footage of drummers just before we kicked off. Great idea, wake everybody up and call them to order. Nick, who was one of my panelists and runs Tatu City here in Kenya, speaks in this 1-minute video about e-commerce, blockchain, much more. Very interesting guest, as was everybody. And this was another panel here with Angela, who's the CEO of the Kenya National Chamber, and we were discussing how to shape the future of the East African real estate sector. I thank the organisers for the opportunity. Macro thoughts: is the 30-year bond bull market over? Asks Queen of Charts. I've been saying it's over for years. September 2016 was when I first thought it was going to wobble, and it's managed to hang in there. I wrote a piece then, Mirrors on the Ceiling, the Pink Champagne on Ice, and I said, whenever it hits the exit, that's when the problems are going to start happening. The 10-year, US 10-year, which is really the benchmark for the world, is inching towards 3%. FANG divorced Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google have tended to move higher together in the past, but of late their fortunes have diverged. Amazon's up 33%, Google and Apple up single-digit gains, Netflix up a whopping 72%, but Facebook has fallen 6%. And my view on Facebook, I think they're facing an existential threat. I've already said what I think, and I just don't think he's capable of making the necessary pivot from a broker to an intermediary of information, permissioned specifically by the subscriber. The probability distribution of the future caught my attention. Home thoughts: this is an aerial view of the Mara River, which is the host of the world's greatest wildebeest migration. That's taken by the Fairmont Mara. And that took me back to a bend in the river by V.S. Naipaul. Going home at night, it wasn't often that I was on the river at night. I never liked it. I never felt in control. In the darkness of river and forest, you could be sure only of what you could see. And even on a moonlit night, you couldn't see much. When you made a noise, dipped a paddle in the water, you heard yourself as though you were another person. The river and the forest were like presences, and much more powerful than you. You felt unprotected, an intruder. You felt the land taking you back to something that was familiar, something you had known at some time, but had forgotten or ignored, but which was always there. You felt the land taking you back to what was there 100 years ago, to what had been there always. And this is a tweet from myself when I was down there. Hippos have returned from their nightly escapades. I like this photograph around 7 a.m. on my way to Berbera this morning. Beautiful young family of 4 relocating their lives to a new unknown ground for a better future. Everything they own in their life are on those 3 camels. Fascinating indeed. This is like a painting from the Renaissance. This is from Frank Pallotta. Human nature is shown by the high degree of constancy in human needs, desires, passions, and reactions. It is why human history and events are so repetitive. Interesting. And I like this photograph by Andy Glogower. This is of a giraffe and the sunset in Uganda. Political reflections: the Prime Minister of Armenia has resigned amid protests. This is a photograph from Spectator Index, and the photograph kind of says it all. I must say, I was caught wrong-footed. I've got a few Armenian friends, and I'm going to inquire into what exactly has happened, hopefully by tomorrow's podcast. After each attack, the retired Afghan wrestler would put his muscular shoulders to carry the wounded out of the fire and smoke. On Sunday, his shoulders were needed again. 120 wounded, 60 dead, but he couldn't help. He was among the dead. My piece over the weekend was about the United Kingdom's pivot to the Commonwealth. Of course, the whole story around the Windrush generation was badly handled, and its timing could be better, but I, for one, am bullish about this whole pivot. When you look at the raw data, there are 2.4 billion of us, and I put myself in that category, having been born in Kenya of Indian origin and educated in the United Kingdom. And that, in fact, the Commonwealth is bigger than Facebook. And then I think the important point to make is that really this is a born-free Commonwealth. And I think as such it's a massive blue sky opportunity. And it has the big momentum, as long as we can unlock the potential that is the human capital. I did a short video which was just narrating what I'd written. If you want to prefer a narration in the background, just click on that. International markets: Britain was in surplus on its day-to-day budget for the first full fiscal year since the early 2000s. That's extraordinary. Revenue exceeded spending by £112 million. 12 months through March, meaning Britain is now borrowing only to finance capital investment. Figures from the Office for National Statistics showed on Tuesday. This might also be to do with the austerity that we've seen. Almost a decade of austerity has seen the deficit fall from 9.9% in the aftermath of the financial crisis to 2.1% last year. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 122.18. Dollar index, that's come back higher, 19.95. Japanese yen 108.84. Swiss franc 0.9781. The pound 139.47. The Australian dollar 0.7610. India rupee, that's taken us a weaker turn, 66.355. South Korean won 1077.29. That's softened as well. The Rial 345.23, the Egyptian pound 17.7062, and the Rand 12.2974. I think we need to buy the Rand at this level. Dollar index jumps as US yields hit fresh multi-year highs. This is a chart from Holger. That 88 stop worked, and we're working higher now in the dollar. You can see that pretty much across the board. Some Euro bulls are wondering if the party is over for now. Have a look at this chart from Bloomberg. You see what I've been saying about that 125.60 level. We've gone up there, we couldn't get through, we come back down, and therefore I think we've now worked through that, and we're now going to work lower. Bitcoin up 37% since early April. What a storming rebound. We've got to see whether we can get a little bit higher than here, but otherwise I've got to rethink the situation. Brent crude rose for its 6th day on Tuesday, passing $75 a barrel. This is a chart from Javier Blas. In November, I called for $70, and at that time it was a very bold call. I said I predict the spot crude oil market reprices further to run and lift Brent crude over $70 a barrel. Here we're heading towards 80. Gold, 1327.50, softening up because of the stronger dollar. Emerging markets, we need this across Africa. IDFC Institute has developed a new web tool that allows users to assess the spatial distribution of India's GDP. As army chief, the president has not shed blood and will not shed blood, said Rajanarapianina, referring to himself in the third person. That's Madagascar. The blood has flowed enough in our country. It must stop. The violence must stop. His remarks appeared to signal a change of tone from Sunday, when he described the protests as a coup and warned those who sow unrest and incite people to tear each other apart that the state would respond by assuming its responsibilities. Madagascar is the world's biggest vanilla grower and a prospective oil producer. Opponents of the Indian Ocean Islands government, including former Presidents Mark Ravalomanana and Andy Rajolina, say a new electoral law approved by lawmakers on April 10 favours the incumbent president. The Angolan president, about whom I've been bullish for a while, has sacked his armed forces and his spy bosses in his latest purge. Angola is the best performing emerging market this year, when you look at the Eurobond, and is about to sell a further Eurobond expected to be $2 billion. Angola's Eurobonds have outperformed those of all its emerging market peers this year, is readying a new dollar transaction to take advantage of higher oil prices and a new program with the IMF. Plans to issue at least $2 billion of debt. The Kwanza has now lost 55% of its value against the dollar since June 2014. There have been very important changes to do with the transfer of leadership. Fundamentally, it's been healthy. The improvements have been reflected in the movement of the bonds. 2nd of January, I said I like what I'm seeing in Angola. I said I'm keen on being long Angolan risk. The devil is in the detail of the execution, however. I was worrying about the currency. I would probably look to be long Angola Eurobonds. Those turned out to be hazards ahead if African Eurobond rally comes to a sudden, nasty end. This is an article by Ronak Gopaldas in Business Day. He's saying it was a good year for African financial markets in 2017. On the whole, a feel-good factor returned to the continent after more than 2 years of subpar performance, with average yields for sub-Saharan African Eurobonds dropping from lows of 8.13% in 2015 to 5.87% at the end of 2017. So far in 2018, currency and foreign currency bonds have continued to perform well, and new Eurobond issuances have been oversubscribed and are attractively priced. Yet, despite these improved performances, it is uncertain now whether this rosy outlook will continue or come to a sudden end. On observing these dynamics closely, 3 major disconnects stand out. First, financial markets rallied despite regressive domestic political developments in many countries. Second, the performance of real economies negative and those of their financial markets positive. Third, a major gap has emerged between the old normal and the new normal, specifically around what constitutes unpalatable risk. And then he's explaining deterioration in sovereign ratings, looking at currency trading, and then taking some comments saying also this benign environment is conducive to risk-taking behavior. I said liquidity has so far muted political risk, and concerns from some bond vigilantes that African governments are dangerously overloaded on debt. Therefore, this could well be the calm before a storm. The question is what might trigger this pivot: a non-benign interest rate structure, a sharp deterioration in the US-China trade war, or a big-ticket blow-up in any African country might well be the catalyst. I said Zambia looks like a likely candidate. However, I think the rally has further to go, that there will be more granularity in pricing about African Eurobond pricing, which has become very homogeneous. We are at some point in the future going to witness, I think, a big asymmetric downside move. The UAE packs up its ship carrying belongings to pass Mogadishu. That's from Harun Maruf. And actually, this was something I touched on in my presentation this morning at the East Africa Property Investment Summit. I looked at the geopolitical developments, particularly in the Horn of Africa. Burundi's president has appointed the former leader of a violent youth group linked to the ruling party as his foreign minister. He's digging in. African businesses are driving economic integration on the continent faster than policymakers. The long-held dream of economic integration in Africa is becoming more of a reality thanks to a crop of companies defying high odds. Despite the obvious difficulties of being a Pan-African business, economic integration across the continent is gathering speed, according to a new report by Boston Consulting Group. African companies, including airlines, financial institutions, and telecoms operators, are leading the charge, with Boston Consulting Group's report identifying 75 companies across 18 countries whose businesses are leading to further integration. Interesting report. Something was wrong, horribly wrong, Cyril Ramaphosa says of the Zuma era in an interview with the Financial Times. Very good interview. David asks him about why did it take so long to make his move, and then he quotes Julius Caesar. There is a tide in the affairs of men. I rate him very highly. I think he says all the right things, and actually he has a very clear roadmap. That's why I was bullish about him from the very beginning. This is a photograph, Ramaphoria by Bloomberg. 19th of February, I said you want to be long, limit long Cyril Ramaphosa. The South African all shares down 3.07%. It's a bit of a buy, I think. Dollar versus Rand, I like to buy the Rand at 12.2974. Nigerian all shares up 6.59% this year. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index, the best performing index in the world, up 33.81%. Gekimine, there's a big spat between Gekimine and Glencore. This is their version of events in the Glencore Katanga mining debt fiasco. French billionaire Vincent Bolloré is being held in custody over allegations of corruption in Togo and Guinea, Conakry, linked to his company's port operations, reports Le Monde. That's a very big scalp. Kenya coffee farmers going nuts. Yields record macadamia crop. Kenyan farmers used to grow macadamia trees to shade their coffee bushes. Now they're making so much from production of the nuts that they're abandoning the beans. Kenya's gaining a reputation for its macadamias, with production growing to a record last year. Farm gate prices for unshelled nuts have risen to as high as 180 shillings a kilogram, from about 70 shillings at the start in December, and may climb to 200. Farmers are beginning to discover that this is gold, said Lois Minor, one of the three founders of Nawiri Agribusiness. Wherever coffee is grown, macadamia also grows, and farmers are now aware of the opportunities with macadamia. Kenyan coffee production has dwindled after years of mismanagement. The industry regulator to 38,620 metric tons last year from a peak of 130,000 tons in 1989. De La Rue invested 286 million shillings in the expansion of its Kenyan site. I wrote about them in my Commonwealth article because 86% of their business is in the Commonwealth. BAT has chopped 24 more employees at a cost of $3.92 million, intensifying its retrenchment. The Kenya shilling is back below 100 at 99.99. We could go as low as 98.50. Nairobi all shares up 5.53% year to date, but we've dropped 8% since hitting a record high on April 5. NSE 20 is positive, up 0.12%. Nation Media has appointed Stephen Dunbar Johnson, president of International New York Times, onto its board. Fresh produce exports contributed 115 billion, 0.25 billion shillings to Kenya last full year. Thank you kindly for stopping by. I'm always deeply grateful.